Hey, good morning, peeps. We've been gone for a couple days. Life intervenes from time to time, and notwithstanding our commitment to be with you Monday through Friday, 8 to 8:30 at least each day, sometimes it just doesn't work. Hey, Mike, good to see you again. How?
Good morning, Norm. Good morning, Norm. And I'll fall on the sword here. I was very sensitive to any invitations for minor changes in our schedule this week. And so at the invitation of Norm, credit to you for wanting to still do it. But I just simply could not sacrifice anything other than the slots we had allocated, just due to other client concerns and just a demand for what we've got going right now. So don't apologize for that. Very proud of that. However, it does mean that sometimes we have to make sacrifices, and no disrespect to you, Norm, or to the viewers, but we do have client obligations on this side, and they reign supreme.
Brian Steele, let's talk about what's going on in the Young Thugs trial in Atlanta.
Man, this is such an. So, have you seen any of the videos, Norm?
I have. I watched them carefully. Yeah.
Man, and what do you think?
Do we have any of them to show, or do we just
pull some up? So just sort of tease the intro to some of this stuff, and I'll go and find a video. I'll put this on the screen.
So we're in day 90 probably of the Young Thugs trial. It's a RICO case brought out of Atlanta, out of Fonnie Williams' jurisdiction, and there was a confrontation this week with Brian Steele on behalf of the Young Thugs, or at least one of them, an accused.
Young Thug, yeah. So Young Thug is an artist, so he's just one guy.
Okay.
YSL is the group, and I actually happen to like much of Young Thug's music, so that's why I'm able to even say that. And he's never looked this fat though, so I don't know what's going on. Maybe he is wealthy and showing it, but historically, Young Thug has been a slender figure. Anyway, just a little tidbit there.
So, obviously I'm not up to speed on the rap scene, but I try to keep up to speed on what's going on in the law. So Steele and the trial judge have a confrontation that lands Steele in jail. And to me, it's an amazing confrontation. And the background is as follows. A witness was on the stand last week, and that witness was reluctant to testify for Fifth Amendment reasons. The court ordered him to testify. Nonetheless, he didn't. He was held in contempt. The state apparently needed his testimony. And so the state agreed to grant him, I think, immunity. And the grant of immunity took place in chambers. I don't know what Georgia law is. Each state has different procedures for the grant of immunity. And so what does that mean? If you have a Fifth Amendment concern, that is, that your testimony might tend to incriminate you, you have a right to remain silent. That's black letter law everywhere in the United States. I'm not sure how the judge concluded he couldn't evoke the Fifth, but in order to avoid error, the state of Georgia undoubtedly concluded over the weekend, look, let's eliminate any Fifth Amendment concerns. Let's remove from the judge's desk the possibility that he's going to make a mistake. And let's get this kid where he's got to testify. If we grant him immunity, he can't evoke the Fifth. So apparently there was a in-chambers conference. That is a conference that took place in the judge's office with the door closed.
Ex parte is the Latin that's being thrown around the internet, Norm.
Well, and it was ex parte as well, meaning the defense was not invited.
Correct.
Apparently, the witness was told by the state, look, now you can't not testify. If you refuse to testify, we're going to hold you in contempt, and until you purge your contempt, you're going to remain behind bars, and that will be as long as all of these trials take. And given the fact that this one alone is in its 90th day, that could be a long time. And allegedly, during the session with the judge, the declarant acknowledged shooting and killing someone. So the defense doesn't know anything about this, or at least it's not supposed to. But someone tells Brian Steele on behalf of Young Thug about this, and the following confrontation ensues in open court.
I missed.
Can we play it?
You're not. No, I will not answer that question. Why will you not answer that question?
The judge wants to know who told you about what happened. Judge wants to know who told you about what's going on.
Going forward, What I was told was that Mr. Copeland said,
And you haven't answered my question yet.
I'm not
How
going
did
to answer
you-
that question.
You're not.
No, I will not answer that
Why
question.
will you not answer that question?
Because I want to make sure that what I say is accurate, and I'm not trying to get
No.
anybody else.
I'm
into
asking you,
any-
how did you get this
I'm
information?
not telling the court. What I'm saying is based upon information.
Okay, well, listen, if you don't tell me how you got this information, then you and I are going to have some problems.
We can have this. I have problems right now. and
Okay,
I'd like to
I know.
continue.
Look, I don't want to know about your problems. Okay, at this point in time, all I'm asking you at this point in time is, how did you come upon this information? Look, if the case gets reviewed, the record's going to be available for our appellate court and for whatever reason. But it's disturbing that somehow you have surreptitiously gotten information in regards to the court's private ex parte conversation.
So Norm, I just wanted to pause there for a second just to point out that this judge is saying that you, counselor, surreptitiously got information about a surreptitious ex parte meeting that you weren't supposed to know that happened, okay? And I'm entitled to know how you surreptitiously got information about a surreptitious conversation that you would want to know about, but I didn't disclose. Anyway, I'll keep it playing.
With a party. I mean,
A party,
yes.
a witness who was sworn in Friday. The court's telling, this is what I was told. If this is not true, not true. This court
Mr. Steele,
handed
ask
Mr.
me.
Copeland.
Tell me how you
perjury.
got the information.
Listen, whatever you want to do.
Tell me how you got the information, then we can go ahead and go forward.
I'm not going to say that. What I'm going to say is this. I was told, and I hope this concerns the court.
It
I was
concerns me that you have proprietary information.
Why is it
or
proprietary?
information that you should not
We're
be
whipping up a
having
new
that was
brand of
ex
McDonald's
parte.
fries.
Why?
Here.
With a
You can't know
party.
the secret recipe.
Why?
State of Georgia.
How about the witness? How about Mr. Copeland, who supposedly announced he's not testifying and he'll sit for 2 years, and then supposedly
That's
this honorable court,
okay.
or excuse me, let me rephrase that. This court supposedly said, I can hold you until the end of this trial. Ms. Hilton supposedly said, actually, all of the defendants and then all 26 people are disposed of. If that's true, what this is coercion, witness intimidation, ex parte communications that we have a constitutional right to be present for. So I understand that you're upset towards me, but I don't know what I did.
Mr. Steele, I
I'm doing
still
what
want to know,
everybody should
how did you come upon this information? Who told you?
What I want to know is, why wasn't I there? Why,
Sir, I'm going to hold you in contempt if you don't tell me who tell me who this
I
information
don't
was
want to
come
be held
from.
in contempt.
Well,
I'm not
then-
answering that question. That's attorney-client privilege information. I am not answering.
Attorney-client privilege, unless you were in my chambers, that's the only way you can figure out.
I am
I
telling
tell you
you.
what, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. If you don't tell me
You
who
don't have to.
if you don't tell me who it is, I'm going to put you.
Well, let me-
I'm going to put you in contempt
I
because
understand.
that is not attorney-client privilege.
Attorney work product privilege. I am not.
How did you get that information
I don't
supposedly
answer
from
that
my
question.
chambers? Did somebody tell you?
I'm not. You should have told me.
You got 5 minutes.
Well, I don't need it. I want to continue.
I don't need it.
This is what I was told. Mr. Copeland made statements that he admitted to killing Donovan Thomas and was. Don't take my notes. No.
Yeah, so that last part I wanted to make sure we got the audio in for. Don't take my notes. Amazing, right? So I don't want us to overlook that. We'll get to the substance of that exchange, but the fact that the attorney Brian Steele there had to tell the bailiff, "Don't take my notes." What was that about?
Yeah, I don't know what that's about. I mean, I don't know what's going on in that courtroom. That was chilling in the extreme. I do want to make this into a broader conversation about what happens in court on the record and off the record. The difference usually, if they tried this with Norm, I'm marching from Oklahoma. Let me tell you a story. Well, let me stop. It's not an automatic mistrial, Ian. Let's get to this. The manner in which judges manage their docket differs from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and manage their cases from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And it also differs within the various courts. So, for example, in federal courts throughout the country, it is almost impossible to have an in-chambers meeting with the court about a case. You have to make a special request, and they want to do everything on the record because transparency is paramount. In many state court proceedings, especially in Connecticut, a ton takes place off the record. And there are communications between parties and the judge, the lawyers and judges off the record before the record is made, and what gets said in chambers the public never knows about. And I've often spoken to members of the press saying, the First Amendment gives us a right of access to the court, and there are secret meetings going on in judges' chambers routinely. Why isn't the press asking to have a representative at those meetings? And I've never really gotten an answer on that. As a practitioner, frankly, I find it easier not to have the press present in the chambers meetings, because people can be freer. They don't have to worry about being misquoted in the press and so forth. But this is where deals often work out. But one of the most amazing meetings I ever had in a judge's chambers took place in federal court, and it was almost identical to this meeting. A client of mine was entering into a cooperation agreement with the government. He was also going to plead guilty on a certain day. And before he pled guilty, which he would do in open court, he was entering into a cooperation agreement, which he did not enter in open court. In the judge's chambers sat me, the prosecutor, the client, and a court reporter. And we went through the terms of the cooperation agreement. I don't remember exactly what they were, but it was expected that our client would offer testimony against somebody the government was interested in. And then the judge did something that stunned me. He said, when I go out onto the record, I'm going to ask you, as to this plea, whether you've had any side agreements or whether anybody's offered you anything in exchange for this plea agreement, and you are to answer no. And so, to me, that the prestige of the federal courts tumbled a great degree in that moment, because basically what I thought I had was a federal judge instructing a client to be less than candid with the court in circumstances where candor is required. Obviously, I didn't say anything because it served my interest. Now, in this case, Mr. Steele had a source, and a meeting of a similar type took place in the judge's chambers, and a reluctant witness was who had been on the stand. A reluctant witness was taken into chambers and was made an offer in the middle of his testimony by the state, and was then basically threatened by the state. Unless you comply, you're going to sit for a long, long time. And the court did not invite defense counsel in for that colloquy, apparently did not provide defense counsel a transcript of that colloquy. And then when it learned that this information had found its way into the defense counsel's hands, it sought to conduct an inquiry into how the court's secrecy was violated, rather than how the defendant's right to confront a witness had been potentially abridged. And so I give Steele a lot of credit for standing up to the judge and refusing to give his source. Listening to what he said at first it was attorney-client privilege. That is unlikely unless the witness and his client bumped into each other in the lockup, which is, again, extremely unlikely, because it's almost always the case that in a larger institution, you're going to keep people who are on the stand away from those they are testifying against. But realistically, what probably happened is the prison grapevine got this to Steele. The witness didn't want to testify. The witness didn't want to be in the position he was in. The witness was offered his immunity agreement, and the witness went out into the lockup and said, make sure Young Thug's lawyer hears about this, and Young Thug's lawyer did. So the judge did, after a 5-minute break, hold Steele in contempt. Steele was removed from the courtroom, apparently in handcuffs, according to one picture. Complaining all the while that his client was being deprived under the Sixth Amendment of his right to counsel of choice. The state even relented at some point and said, Judge, you got to bring him back up here. Steele resumed.
And then we had the notorious and now famous attorney Merchant that was very active during the disqual hearings for Fannie Willis. She showed up along with about 20 other attorneys in support, in a show of solidarity for Mr. Steele. and what he was doing. One thing I wanted to point out, Norm, before we have to transition away from the story, I think this is fascinating. I think it's very compelling. I have great admiration for the restraint that Brian Steele showed, even during this exchange with the court. He was very clear. I don't want to be held in contempt, but I'm not giving you what you want, right? And the judge seemed to just sort of be more pushed in an emotional way because his authority over the court was being perceptibly undermined, and that, you know, that's just my take on it, and was not able to actually rein this in a responsible way and keep things focused on the trial at hand. Or, I mean, to me, Norm, he could have actually called counsel to Chambers. He could have called the state, and he could have called Brian Steele to Chambers, and they could have had this discussion outside of the view or the well of the court, right? And
yeah, they could have, but Steele wanted his moment in the sun. He
well,
wanted,
yeah, he's an opportunity. I take
no, I'm not talking about for ego's sake, but he wanted to deliver the news about what this young man had confessed to in Chambers, and he wanted to make sure the press got it. I think in service of his client, he thought that truth needed to be spoken aloud, and it was. He ended up being ordered in contempt and held for, what was it, 10 weekends, 20 days?
I think it was like it could have been 10 weekends, 2 days per weekend for 20 days, or I thought I read 20 weekends. Either way, that was the sentence that he handed down. But one thing I want to make sure that I get in here, because this is sort of my pet project at this point, is that the court, and there are many exchanges on this, and they're all viewable. Law and Crime did the whole thing, and then I want to give a shout out to the attorney Phil Holloway, who we've been on Layback Law with several times. Norm, he does an excellent breakdown, about an hour and 20-minute video of everything, all the ethical issues and the ins and outs of the procedure here. I highly recommend. I think it's at Phil Holloway on X, and you can find him on YouTube. But he made me kind of watch through a lot of this stuff as I was watching his video, and I came to the conclusion that we've come to in other contexts, which is this judge seemed satisfied that even if what he was doing was egregiously out of line with the rules of the court, with ethical obligations and the civil rights and due process afforded to defendants, that this would just be handled on appeal, that we'll just sweep this dirt into the bin of the appellate process and we'll deal with it. It'll be dealt with then, but we're going to push forward with this no matter what. And it just gets me back to this issue, Norm, that I am taking right now with this. It seems like everybody in league with the same political views or whatever are content to just allow the appellate process to clean up the mess that they know they're making in the moment. And that's ridiculous. This sort of authentication of false narratives through the judiciary needs to stop. And the fact that the appellate process is being used as some sort of catch-all is like, I don't even have the words for it right now, because it just makes all of this look illegitimate. All of the work that the prosecutors have done, because I don't want to make a qualification of the strength or lack thereof of their case. This is another RICO case in Georgia, right? But all of the work that the prosecutors have done, let alone the defense attorneys for the co-defendants, but it also reduces the work that they're doing as well. This judge is just stepping right in the middle of it and protecting his own ego to the detriment of the entire process, the taxpayer resources devoted to this. Now, how long did you say this trial been going on?
I think this was the 88th day.
Imagine the resources that have now been shown to be squandered at the hands of this judge's ego and inability to mitigate a train wreck.
There are some judges are better than others. I mean, clearly he mishandled that, in my view. I don't ascribe partisan motives to it. An appeal is frankly all you got sometimes. I mean, I think
he's the one talking about it, though. He is explicitly saying, "Well, this will be taken up on appeal. We'll just let on appeal." Right? Talking about recusal, talking about mistrial, talking about issues that can't actually be purged. Right? All of these issues that need to be dealt with now based on this ex parte meeting and his preoccupation with trying to understand how Steele got information that he wasn't going to disclose to anybody about a witness that was sworn in several days prior and was under oath.
It is extraordinary, Mike. And all I can say is go to trial long enough and feces occur. I mean, I'm not going to demonize the court I don't see the whiff of partisanship in it. I see something that I think is mishandled by the judge. I think Steele Steele had stones. You know, he wanted to get out what was said. He got out what was said. I think that was his objective. He wanted to make sure that everybody knew that that witness confessed to killing someone, and that was probably why he was given immunity. I'm not sure who that person is in the larger context of the case, but it's an epic conflict in a courtroom. I'm not sure it's a referendum on the courts in general. Let's turn. You know, you and I disagree. I asked you to take a look at the Merrick Garland piece in the Washington Post.
Yeah,
and I see our headline is
it was written by
Garland's.
Garland. That's
What?
why it was written by Merrick Garland. That's why I disagree.
Yeah, it's his, is he whining?
Yeah, I'm not interested in reading his whining in the press. Get out of here. You've got over 2,000 active cases against defendants for January 6th, and you're talking about, yeah, don't demonize us. Shut up, man. Shut up. You got shunned for the Supreme Court role that you wanted, and now you're presiding over the largest prosecution that is partisan motivated in our history, and you're whining through the press about demonization of your office and whatever else. Okay, it is what it is. I'm sick of this. But I'll go ahead. You say your piece on it.
I don't know if you read the piece. It sounds like you read the headline and reached conclusions. It wasn't so much his office being picked on for J6, but it was about
anything about it. I just think that he feels compelled to write something and put it in an opinion piece for the Washington Post. Why does someone in his position need to do that, Norm? That's my point.
Because he's a leader of an important federal agency. Look, I am not a fan of the FBI. I don't work there. I don't have clients there. I'm typically adverse to the FBI, but I'm not adverse to the institutions that make civil society possible in the United States. And the FBI is a federal law enforcement agency. And the amount of, just scroll down into the article a little bit, the amount of hyper partisan rhetoric in the country has now led people to appear at FBI offices armed and prepared to do violence. There are people online who are so upset with the FBI that they're declaring war on the FBI.
People online, Norm? People online?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about?
Yes.
We're talking about all the federal agencies, all the acronyms that have been involved in the biggest social media censorship campaigns of the last decade. Who are known
what
for,
do you want to do, Mike? You want to declare war on the FBI and ban it and start shooting?
Don't put words in my mouth.
Like a nut.
Don't put words in my mouth. We got the Attorney General of the United States that is actively involved in how many cases right now? How many cases right now coming out in the Washington Post saying, please don't hate us.
Please don't attack us. You can hate us, but all that hate speech, all that hatred is leading people to attack. And that's a real phenomenon. Yeah, that's a real thing.
DOJ's First Amendment right.
I beg your pardon?
I said let's defend the DOJ's First Amendment rights. Hate speech. That's crazy.
Let's defend the right of law enforcement to enforce a set of rules of neutral principles, because that's what it does. When we disagree with their priorities, let's change administrations. If we think that they have effectively violated the rights of other people, that's what the commutation process is all about. But it seems to me that Merrick Garland is within his rights to speak up on behalf of the thousands of men and women who work in the FBI trying to enforce the law for the sake of a better country. Now, do I agree with all of the FBI and Justice Department priorities? No. I was one of the first to say online that Merrick Garland's decision to prosecute in the way he has in J6 is reason alone to remove him from office. I agree. But go to the top of the article here. Last week, a California man was convicted of threatening to bomb an FBI field office where hundreds of agents and other employees work. In one of his threats to the FBI, the man wrote, "I can go on a mass murder spree. In fact, it would be very explainable by your actions." I do not have a problem with Merrick Garland calling this to the attention of the public and saying, own your rhetoric. Check what you're doing. Continue, move on through the article. These threats of violence have become routine in an environment in which the Justice Department is under attack like never before. In recent weeks, we've seen an escalation of attacks that go far beyond scrutiny, criticism, and legitimate oversight of our work. Doesn't that concern you, Mike?
Not at all.
Well, I guess we've reached one of our critical impasses here, because I would
not interested in pretending that the FBI is somehow vulnerable right now. I'm just not interested in pretending as though the stick that they have been wielding with absolute reckless abandon in the last 5 to 7 years, and the Department of Justice and the way that that's been handled. I'm just not sitting here pretending that people online who have been pushed apart, particularly post 2020, are somehow like now able to mount collect, especially if we look at what happened with Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, right? How is that handled? This is just not, this is completely ridiculous that we would look at this on the face of what he's saying and say, oh yeah, the FBI, they're particularly vulnerable. We need to protect the FBI. The FBI has been shown to be excessive in nearly everything it's done with respect to individuals. What about the individuals that have been killed with FBI enters into their homes in the last year, right? We talked about one on this stream. What was it, in March?
So the FBI, should we disband the FBI, Mike?
I'm just saying that this is ridiculous.
Should we disband the FBI, Mike?
Are you asking, why are you taking what I'm saying, criticizing the FBI?
Because what you're doing is you're taking you take an example of something that's gone wrong and you demonize the entire agency and say, as a result, the agency has no right to assert a claim for public respect and a call for calm and an evaluation of things on a case-by-case basis.
You think this article is a call for calm? You think that it has the intended effect? You think the average person that reads this has anything more to do with this than use it as toilet paper? If they actually get it,
I do. I'm one of the average people who read it, and I respected it, even though I don't want Merrick Garland as Attorney General.
Well, and we didn't want him as a Supreme Court justice either. So it sounds like we don't really want him anywhere near the levers of power, except we're supposed to give deference to something he's writing in the Washington Post as an opinion piece. It's just like, I don't know. This is not.
I'm an institutionalist, Mike.
I would be.
I believe in the institutions of American government.
Right?
I'm not a fan or a sycophant of law enforcement, but the FBI has my respect, even when it does a bad job. And I don't think you blame the messenger for the policymaker's decision. And when you've got people who are apparently prepared to go to an FBI office and blow it up, I think that's an appropriate time to call for calm.
At least that's what he says. You know what I mean? And look, yeah, they.
Well, what do you think? He had a secret meeting?
You think that the opinion? No. Do you think the opinion piece in the WaPo is how this stuff gets out? No. The Department of Justice has a website and they publish bulletins and newsworthy events all the time, just like the Federal Bureau of Investigation does. Every 3-letter agency has their own comms division. And all I'm saying is that now that we are on the other side of the 2020 election, we now know that Facebook, Google, then Twitter, etc., had backdoors for federal law enforcement agents and who were working in an oppositional capacity to those that were supporting one candidate over the other, censoring speech, etc. I'm just not prepared to take the words of the Attorney General to say that the FBI is now somehow vulnerable because some asshole, pardon my French, may just got us demonetized if we hadn't already, because some idiot made a direct threat to the FBI. Because that first sentence, Norm, that you wanted to read, last week, a California man was convicted of threatening to bomb an FBI field office where hundreds of agents and other employees work. And one of his threats to the FBI, not in the abstract and in some sort of, to use the word, serendipitous way, wherever else. He's making these active. So this is a well-adjusted person that we should think is, completely normal, and is somehow just a latent threat like millions and millions of other people. The implications of what he's saying is that the average person should be considered suspect, right?
I disagree. I think what he's saying is, in an environment drenched in extremist speech, in an environment drenched in hatred, and an environment that is hyper partisan, in an environment where there is no trust, you get what you wish for. And what we're starting, and many people engaging in incendiary rhetoric shouldn't be surprised that they get incendiary events. And so he is saying, step back, take a deep breath, calm everyone. And that's the message I took and the message I take. Well, apparently we disagree, and I'm a Fed according to some.
Well, I mean, I think that you have to acknowledge, you're just going to have to steep in the pivot that you've made, and kind of own that, because
I do own it. I'm not ashamed of it for one bit.
I'm not saying
Unlike
you
many of
are.
the, you know,
Just
I
don't.
go to court daily. I deal with FBI agents. I appear in buildings that are protected by federal agents. I appear before judges. I litigate cases hard. And yet I've never come to regard the FBI as my enemy. I regard them as people doing a job who sometimes do it well and sometimes do it poorly. And when they do it poorly, I'm on them like white on rice. But I'm not trying to blow them up.
Just
I'm
like
not trying to kill them.
right?
I'm not trying to sow an environment in this country where we say that the FBI is an illegitimate conqueror that we should view with suspicion, and therefore
Hold on a second.
resistance
Hold
to
on
it
a second.
is.
Oh, please don't attach that to me. Merrick Garland is not an FBI agent. First and foremost, he's the Attorney General of the United States. He works for the
And he's the head of the Justice Department.
right. So he's the one that made this about FBI. Not me, not you. This article that he wrote, not somebody else giving an opinion piece. He wrote it. So the fact that we're talking about the FBI is because Merrick Garland said to talk about the FBI.
That's fine. He should be. That's his job. It's a leadership role.
That, look, if you don't even think that he should be in the position that he's in, and the position that he is in is how he even has the microphone he has in this article. To me, that there,
but he's in the position.
Yeah,
I'm not going to ignore that fact. You know, I mean, the fact that we elect people, we appoint them, and remove them, and while they're in office, they do a job. You can oppose a person and still listen to them. I mean,
yeah, there's been no changes in what's happened within our institutions at all, right? And everything that we were talking about for the last couple of years. I mean, we could talk about the Steele dossier. We could talk about the Hunter Biden.
All failures, epic fails.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then what has changed to give you this position that, that everything's all hunky dory and we should?
I didn't say everything's all hunky dory.
Crazy. That's crazy though, because
I didn't say everything is all hunky dory.
The show is premised on what? The belief that America.
I beg your pardon?
This show is premised on what? That America is suffering from a crisis of institutional legitimacy, right?
You don't need to tell me what a show I created is about, Mike.
Okay. But if America is truly in the midst of an institutional crisis for legitimacy,
you don't stir the pot. You try to find common ground. You try to reach across the aisle. You try to talk to people. And I think what Garland is saying is things are getting out of control.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the difference between Merrick Garland saying that and an individual private civilian saying that is that one of those two wields power over the institution that has a monopoly on violence and the other does not.
So what's
finding common ground in an unequal scenario is not exactly going to land well with the people that come to this show to understand what we're talking about.
Well, so much the worse for that, I suppose, because I think that the purpose of having discussions about law and legitimacy is to diagnose problems, recommend solutions, and live those solutions. And I'm not interested in incendiary rhetoric for the sake of incendiary rhetoric.
Jules asked, Norm, didn't the Russia hoax make you think twice about the FBI as an institution, not individuals,
yes,
the entire organization?
Absolutely.
Haley Shaw, the lack of trust starts at the top. I think Garland has instigated the lack of trust many Americans have. Garland has acted as if a section of the American people are the enemy.
He has
before, right? And so again, it's like this is the messenger more than it is the institution for me. 1,000% the messenger. And if you,
I guess I'm back to where I was with respect to thinking about hate speech and violent rhetoric. We've got to decide what kind of country we want to live in. Do we want to live in a country where handshakes matter or gunshots matter? And I think that when you start to demonize people at the top and say whatever they speak, you can't listen, even if they hold the role, what you're saying is they're illegitimate, and they're illegitimate in that role. And therefore the office is illegitimate and the right to resist exists. And I'm going to exercise that. And you can do so in the form of speech. But if you do so in the form of action, there are consequences. People die, people get hurt, people go to prison. Enough of them do it, you get a social revolution. I get that. And if that's what you want, maybe that's what we're going to get. But I take exception to calling this speech whining. I thought they were well-crafted remarks, and I'm sorry we disagree, Mike.
Not quite Supreme Court justice worthy, but I guess they're all right. Yeah, I don't know what I did to cross a line here. I'm sorry, not sorry, Carrie Berry's mom, whoever you are. Good morning, Allegiant. Hey, by the way, Justin Wright, thank you for $20 in tips this morning.
Yeah, really, Justin. Thanks.
Insane, man. Thank you very much for that. State immunity does not cover you for federal crimes, so still can use the fifth. Blah blah. Thank you, Allegiant News. Good morning to you. And then Phineas Smith says, at what point should the system devolve to where normals see it as fully corrupt? I think the better question, and just, no disrespect, Phineas Smith and Norm, this is something that I've been thinking about privately the last several weeks, just in light of your turn toward the center, as we'll call it. We once discussed the conditions for revolution as provided for in the framers' communications to one another and as instantiated in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It feels like you have pivoted in a manner that makes it impossible for us to recognize what that is, or that you're otherwise unwilling to get back into the meat of that conversation. And I don't mean to put words in your mouth at all, but I do think it's important to continue to try and get back to the foundations of where we were.
I don't think we left them. I just don't think I don't think we're at a point where there's a need for violent revolution in this country. Period.
I'm not suggesting that there is a need for violent revolution, but words are just words, Norm, right? And
words are just words, except they become motivating events that lead to conduct. And when there are enough words, the conduct can become shocking, and people can get hurt and killed, and institutions can get damaged. And civility matters, and being accountable for your speech matters.
Yep, and that goes.
And being accountable for your conduct matters.
And that goes.
I think this country has gone on a toot for about 8 years, and the result is a hyper-partisanship that has us on the eve of a shooting war. And I don't want to participate in one. I'm trying to walk that back.
Right. Well, that sort of apprehension is not necessarily a recipe to resolve issues if they present themselves in a way that many people believe they've already presented themselves, Norm. Right. You're not.
And so my appeal to those people who think that they have presented themselves to the point of the need for actual resistance is, are you serious? Or do you really want to live in that society?
Yeah. But being afraid to have to live in that society is a different question, or a different answer than simply having the discussion that says we should not be afraid to have the discussion in the abstract, right?
I don't think I'm afraid to have the discussion in the abstract. And I think Garland is right to come to the table and represent one side of that discussion.
What table, right? Who
sit at one, Mike, come on.
Who from the civilian population is sitting at the table that he's talking around?
No one, because no one's sitting at the table but him.
Yeah,
look, Mike, I think we've come to the end of productive discussion on this. I understand your views about Garland. I have a different perspective. I don't like his priorities on J6 at all. I think the right has been demonized. But I do think that the level of toxic rhetoric in this country has gone on to an extreme, and the result is we're getting toxic behavior, and you get enough of that behavior in civil society unwinds, and I am not interested in that, and I will oppose it.
Well, no matter what you think about the productivity, people love these discussions, and I do too, but I'm definitely not going to back down from where we both.
Nobody's asking you to back down.
Well, I mean, but you've backed into a different position, Norm. And
maybe I have, maybe I haven't. That's what that's what happens when you make the Mike. When you have this isn't a doctrinaire show. This is a show about having discussions about what's going on in the country. I've paid my dues. I did my time on the J6 line. I watched the results of the Proud Boys trial. I've watched the results since. I have strong views about that. I've watched political speech. I've watched attacks on judges. I know what I value. I've decided to come out as an institutionalist. I am going to support American political institutions and their legitimacy because I don't believe that right now we're in a situation that calls for a social revolution.
Well, look, I'll find some quick common ground for us, but Norm, there are two different conversations as a part of this, and I don't want you to get away rhetorically with being able to identify an institution or saying that you're an institutionalist and then being able to disqualify me from being able to find philosophical common ground for why you would say that, because the issue is the people occupying the institutions. Institutions don't have rights. We know that, right? But in my world as a transactional attorney, I think the institutions that regulate these industries that I work with, in particular, have fallen victim to a particular level of incompetence, and have devolved into less of a client-customer relationship with the industry it serves, and more into a, I have and you must beg for what you need from me relationship, right? Very unilateral in that way. I think that our institutions as an idea are fine. But the issue that you seem to be content to ignore is that the last 7 years, whatever has created this hyper-partisanship isn't just because people just decided that they wanted their lives to be frenetic, unpredictable, and live in some sort of apprehension or fear for their basic civil liberties, their ability to speak, their ability to organize, their ability to elect who they want to elect, right? And that sincerely held belief is structured atop a foundation of what has revealed itself to be, hey, how long have we been lied to about these basic fundamental issues? And why do those in our institutions get to put on a suit and tie and then talk calmly and pretend as though they're not doing what they're actually doing out in the world, right? So I too would love to be an institutionalist in 2024 and beyond. As a matter of fact, I think that our institutions are what provide for good public policy. And I'm talking about on the consumer level, right? Consumer packaged goods, consumables. I think about the FDA. I think about the health department. But these are all institutions, Norm, that the average person looks at with disdain and disgust, right? As feckless iterations of themselves that have
I
a
don't
great.
know that.
No,
The
absolutely.
average person looks at this with disgust.
Ask the average person about CBD and the FDA and see if they have any idea as to whether they trust the FDA isn't
My
just
experience with jury selection is most people don't pay any attention to any of this stuff.
okay. Well, that's okay. However, I just wanted to be on the record to say that I think our institutions as an idea are great. But to say that you are an institutionalist has weird connotation right now, considering the state that our institutions are in. And I understand
Well,
that there is
considering the general election that's coming and what we're going to ask our whoever the new leadership to do with these institutions is, I think a commitment to institutions is important. I'm less interested in personalities than I am in processes.
too bad the personalities are dominating over the processes. That's where we break, and that's why the personality that is Merrick Garland has no quarter for any intellectual curiosity on my part. So he won't get it. He hasn't earned it.
Well, he
Earn it.
does on mine, and so we disagree. I commend folks an independent reading of Merrick Garland's piece, Unfounded Attacks on Justice Department Must End. I think it's good reading, and I recommend it.
Yep. I watch more YSL stuff and Brian Steele. You'll feel better about it.
Thanks for listening, folks. Mike, how do people find us?
You can find us right here on at LawPod Daily, on the red platform at LawPod Daily, on the green platform Law and Legitimacy, and on the black platform at LawPod Daily. Many of you here today, thank you, Justin Wright, again for the tips. I think we're up to 30 from all Justin. You're the man. Thank you. Also, I think I saw another tip come through from Imperious. Thank you for the tip as well. And over on Rumble, I see all of you there. I'm going to find a way to get the Rumble chat kind of, I think, visible, at least on the screen in a small way, Norm, so that we can see, because we've got a lot of people there that want to contribute to the conversation, and hard for me to actually contribute to the conversation and navigate between different windows. But please be patient with me, everybody. I am trying. This is the story that we didn't get to, Norm, that I think you were interested in talking about. So maybe we slot this for tomorrow in addition to whatever we do. But
that works.
I think the DEI stuff in government may actually bring us back a little bit to the conversation about the Department of Justice, but we'll patiently wait on that one. Anyway, Norm, anything else?
Nope. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.